Hello and welcome to the Kuyumangi Institute, our Q&A Conversation for Exploration series. I'm Paul Robert, the Executive Director and President of the Institute, and along with my wife, Laura Lee, the Director of Research, Education, and Outreach, and on behalf of our Board of Directors, our advisors, volunteers, and supporting members, we want to thank you for being here today. The Kuyumangi Institute is an independent, nonprofit research organization committed to researching consciousness and the human experience following the footsteps of our founder, anthropologist, Dr. Felicitas Goodman. And our focus is reflected in three main areas: experience, education, and exploration. We respect the path of academic balance, the creative pursuit of science, while advancing and conserving and restoring a direct experience of that deeper human connection to all of life. And as an educational institution, we take an open approach. So we invite scholars in related fields to help broaden the scope of our own work and exploration, and that's why we call this Conversation for Exploration. And on these Sunday discussions, we've had a full spectrum of topics: neuroscience, anthropology, archaeology, astronomy, philosophy, psychology, mythology, shamanism, art, theater, and much more.
And we go exploring.
And you're welcome to join us at our website at kuyumangiinstitute.com. All of our presentations are free, and as a nonprofit, of course, we invite you to become a supporting member, and we thank you, the community members who continue to support the mission of the Kuyumangi Institute. Today, let's explore ways of bridging our collective traditions, finding the meeting point between spirituality and global mind. How do we find connections between the spectrums of faith, traditions, and worldviews? Now, we have shared stories, and these stories can unite us. Finding ways to understand, respect, and work differing perspectives is more important than ever for a collective well-being. And it's all part of understanding our world and our place in it on a larger scale of our global family. Our panel today invites us to bring our voices together in our shared quest for unity. The importance of looking at whatever spiritual approach we have personally, and at the same time opening ourselves to consider others in a more universal, accepting, and inclusive way. It's the ability and willingness to deeply connect oneself and others within that broader matrix of our world around us and an expanded global consciousness, where we can intentionally work together for a brighter, more conscious future.
Well, we feel a lot of kinship with our guest today.
Yeah.
We often talk about expanding our bandwidth, of finding common ground with the sages of the ages, and that this realm, these access codes to something larger than ourselves, is the birthright of all of us. And that we have this inherent capacity for direct experience of that. And we can usher in a new story of who we truly are, a new world view that better accommodates our experience, that we are one with the all and our shared values, and that we can move the dial through dialogue, a fitting motto for Conversation for Exploration, and that exploring is a sacred quest for a deeper understanding of our world and our place in it, and that requires pushing the limits of our collective worldview. So we find the work of our guest today has striking parallels. He too looks at this collective body of wisdom, logos, a catch-all term for the unifying and universal underlying primordial principles of reality expressed among the world's traditions, and that we are all connected. Indeed, we are all one. Ashok Gangadeen founded the Institute for Global Dialogue, an outgrowth of his 45 years as the Margaret Guest Professor of Global Philosophy at Haverford College, a Quaker college, to help us reach that place of unity through dialogue. He defines monologue as interpreting through one's own lens or worldview, whereas dialogue on a global scale necessitates reaching across worldviews to communicate truly and deeply. To engage in deep dialogue, he says, we must examine our own lens and dilate, open up heart and mind to expand our own worldviews so we can embrace others, Doesn't mean we have to adapt or adopt or convert, but we can build bridges to meet each other halfway. So after our first interview with Ashok, in which we talked our way through the logosphere, we theorized, we philosophized, we invited him back to dive deep into this process of dilated dialogue, to untangle it, demonstrate it, give us real life examples, to put into action the building of a few bridges across our worldviews. And he's brought backup. We have his colleague Nedra Fetterman, a licensed psychologist and a senior fellow with the Global Dialogue Institute, and his son, Näthan Saith Gangadeen, musician, yoga teacher, and like all Ashok's children, well-versed in this work. So join me in welcoming Ashok, Nedra, and Näthan. Hello.
Welcome all.
Welcome.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Well done. Pleasure to be with you all, Laura Lee and Paul, Nedra, a great friend and colleague, Näthan. I know Näthan for a long time.
Indeed.
Laura, you set this up very well. And the whole point of this conversation, a deep dialogue, going into deep dialogue, just to give you a sense of what does deep dialogue mean? I'd like to just give you a quick visual to pick up from what we did 3 weeks ago, which is Logos, Sophia, the infinite force, is the underlying foundation of all realities and worlds. And when you're looking for common ground and interfaith and all of these different attempts to really meet across worlds, this is really what the move to deep dialogue is. So if you don't mind there, Laura Lee and Paul, may I just put up a sketch here?
You do. And I just want to say that one of the great divides that we're very interested in is science and spirituality. I think they don't need to be so far apart. So it's not just the world's traditions, it's our common traditions as well that we're engaged in. I think there are a lot of bridges to build. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And this is the ultimate foundation of bridge building, because, and again, it's the logosphere is the deepest level of first philosophy through the ages. All the great wisdom traditions and spiritual traditions are trying to tap what's on the ground floor. And I'm using the word logosophia, which is one word. Sophia is the embodiment of wisdom in the universe. And I'm philosophia, love of philosophy, wisdom. Logos is the light of reason. And no one can be outside of the logos space. So you don't have to use God talk or even get spiritual. You can be scientific. What's the fundamental field of being? And that is logos space. So this hologram that I have here is showing the double parentheses in blue and the infinite space, logos Sophia, unum pluribus. Unum meaning the infinite unifying of diversity. And diversity is infinitely connected of the universe and yet infinitely one. And we need to understand there's a switch from our everyday language and culture code to move into that. That's what the 7 stages of deep dialogue is. A space from monologue, which I'll put up here, to deep dialogue, which is here. From I, it, where everything is objectified as an object in our cultural code, our worldviews, our identities, self and other, I and it, and then I and thou. And the 7 stages would be, how do we go from this code, which dominates our human condition, and is the source of fragmentation, polarization, violence, of all objectification of each other, and cuts us off from access to the source. That really came up in our first conversation. And I just want to give a visual to show that I'll put here, this is where our cultures in this space, the person, the thinker, the person who is experiencing, and the screen of awareness, and how we process information and join pieces of concepts and words and percepts to create our world and experience. And this is where we have the space of all of our cultural lives, our inner life, our emotions, our nature, facts, all of this phenomena. And there are many different lenses that can be used in this technology. I'll put that for the lens of, here's I and we, the thinker, the experiencer, and we interpret. We make sense of what appears to us, our inner experience, our outer, and we form an ID, and we make entities and objects, and so that's where we live. And there's a space between thinker and what we think, what we feel and what we experience. We objectify. This is I and this is it. This is very important. The most important point that came out last time, a few weeks ago, is that the code, which is not seen, I'm putting it in red, is shaping all of these different worldviews. You change your lens, you change your narrative, you change your world. So we can do all kinds of transformations and many different worldviews here. Boundless worldviews according to different narratives that we have. How do we find connection? But this code of consciousness cuts us off from a deeper access. And that's the whole point. To the space, and I use double parentheses to mark when we cross into the deep dialogue code, because dialogue means dialogos, through the logos, via Sophia. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean two people. So dialogue is not, deep dialogue is not possible in this technology. It's important to become aware of the code that's implanted, that's shaping all of our worlds and cultures, and it's a fragmenter, it's a shredder. It has units, it has a logic. A is A, we saw last time. It has units, and that units, I'm a unit, you're a unit, my world is a unit, space is a unit, times, everything is made into a unit separate, and that's a chop shredder of this red zone. And the whole point of deep dialogue from I, it, so everything is objectified, which is a kind of violence of the other, I and the other. But the I here and the other here is I and thou. It's a sacred space because everything in the logosphere is boundlessly, deeply, unimplorable, connected. This is a space of deep dialogue. So the question, how do we go from monologue here? Every word we use, dialogue is still not dialogue. It's not deep dialogue. So deep dialogue is a step of moving from here into the sacred space of I, other, where the other is not objectified, but you meet the other. And Buber says I, it, and I, thou, for example, meeting. This is the meeting point of sacred self and other. And you can't meet here with your lens, the other there. You have to step back from this code and make that. That's a hero's journey. That's a human journey from being immersed within a code we didn't see and understand. When we become aware of that, the stage one is when you begin to say, oh, you begin to have the first step of the other, my partner, whatever, the other world, the other religion that I was seeing was through my lens. How do I meet the other? And those are the 7 stages you will go through now practically of moving from ego log, from Lego pieces to unum sacred flow. That's all I want to say.
So you say that obviously there's many ways of getting there. You say even athletes, when they get in the zone, right? They're noted for entering into a mystical state almost. Meditation, mystical state. Our work, mystical state. The sages of the ages operated from a mystical state. So can dialogue alone, the intellect alone, get us there? Or is it a combination of reaching that state and then understanding it and then dialoguing from there? Can two people in the monologue reach it on their own?
Well, that's the whole point. We're going to go through that right now. What are the stages of going from an uncritical just way we live in our culture and we objectify ourselves and other with a technology we haven't understood clearly, but it's right there. And this is what 7 stages are meant to bring out. And all of our great wisdom teachers, it's not only mystical. Mystical is a word in which there are no words for truth. Here's truth, but there are no words. But the Logos is the infinite word. And the dialogue is a deeper code of language where you I and thou, you meet the other. So when athletes are in the zone, they have a zone moment. They step spontaneously out of this space without even willing it. They just get into a
physiologically. Yeah.
There's a flow. So I don't like to use the word mystical only because mysticism is where we say, I see the truth. It's beyond our language. There's no words for it, so we must be silent. But what we're saying here, on the contrary, all great wisdom teachers, Buddha spoke from here, Krishna spoke from here, Moses brought the laws from here, Jesus spoke, Buddha spoke from here. What are they speaking? A deeper dialogue code of tapping the source field, tapping the science of the unified field, to put it in science. You're right to bring out science, Laura Lee. Science wants to get the unified field.
It's our current great wisdom tradition, and it's still trying to look for the underlying principles of reality.
And so
it's just another method to go about it.
Well, when you say just another method, I really want to pause. We've not been able to do this yet for 2,500 years, really, as an institution of culture. Why? Something is blocking us. So although there are many paths, you say one mountain, many paths. No, you've got to really face what's blocking us from getting to the unum. So there may be many paths, many yogas, many practices, but unless we face the code that's blocking us, the code and enter into the open space, you say dilated dialogue. We'll see as we now go through the 7 stages. Yeah. I think we've done enough talking. Let's see stage one.
And there's also many ways of expressing it beyond words alone. Great music, art, dance, theater, gestures, just in the being. I mean, there are many also ways of expressing it.
When you say words, they're words, the word itself. Word here excludes music and body language. So, but word, the beginning is the word. This word is so deep.
Yeah.
Music, silence, all of that is here in this word. The double bracket word is flowing in all of these modes of language. They're all there.
Note that logosphere, as you put it. Yeah.
All
right, you have 7 stages. What are these 7 stages? I do think that they are the hero journey. Reading through them, they look like the hero journey, right? You are thrust out on a quest, and you face challenges and threshold guardians. You find your deep, dark night of the soul that you face. You come through the other side. You get to get so much like the hero's journey. So I like that part of your 7 stages.
What I'd like to build on that point. What is heroic here? It's the hero daring to step back from where we live and face, oh my God, I've been living in a matrix, a code that's been cutting me off from source. And to let that go, it takes great courage, because there's a phobia. Yeah. There's a dialogue phobia to really open up to the intimacy of engaging the other. There's a phobia. So the heroic person, it's not just a hero's journey, it's a human journey. From being a human here in this subtext to coming into the primary space where you mature as a moral being. This is a moral space. This is sacred space. This is scientific space.
It's a form of maturation, stepping beyond yourself.
Well said. Well said. It's a human maturation of who we are. Yeah. And the code has been impeding and blocking us. Let's get on with the 7 stages.
Okay. And would you like the next step? Do you want to pull up a slideshow, or do you want to bring it the other?
Do the slideshow.
So these are 7 stages of deep dialogue, and the stage 1 is where we begin to see that the other that I've been looking at was I was gaslighting the other. I was projecting my lens on the other. I was not facing the other in the deep sense as a not an object, but a thou. So would someone read it, please?
Go ahead.
The first encounter comes with a certain shock, with a realization of an other, a different way of life, a different worldview, an alien other that resists, interrupts, disrupts my settled patterns of interpretation. I'm in my comfort zone, right? With this primal encounter, there's a new realization that my habits of mind cannot make sense of this other. This radical encounter with difference, a different world, a different way of making sense of and experiencing the world, is disconcerting, sometimes threatening, and evokes a vulnerability to this alien presence. I have a new sense of delimitation, and I feel challenged to change, to revise my way of relating to this other. I realize now that my habit of translating the other into my pattern of, quote, minding, of appropriating the other to my worldview is dysfunctional. I am forced towards a self-critical thinking. So I face a sudden silence, pause, opening, an open horizon of uncertainty and risk. I must make a decision to move forward or draw back.
Well read. Nicely done. So we can pause now and just have some reflections on the stage. For example, we want to be experiential and practical now, because we all have this experience, whether we're in couples. Nedra might talk about this, but if you're a couple, men are from Mars and women from Venus, we're talking across worlds, we're not connecting. How do we communicate? And in that situation, when you realize I've been objectifying and gaslighting my other, I've been gaslighting nature, I've been gaslighting the work of art, the music, everything, because we're interpreters. Human are interpreters. And when we interpret, we use the lens that we've developed all our lives within the cultural space. It was a red zone. And we see the other, and we don't even realize that we're just objectifying the other. We're treating the other here and not here. So stage 1 is that it disrupts my world. It interrupts my interpretations of everything. And so I hope you pick up. So I want to hear the voices of my co-panelists, Nedra and Näthan.
I'll just say that that's probably why it invokes the fight or flight response, and it gets so argumentative and divisive. People are defending that worldview that they want to protect.
It's reptilian. Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Nedra?
Yeah, I mean, one word that I use to describe stage 1 is self-absorption. Each of us are absorbed in our own worlds. And why is that? Because so many of us have experienced some kind of pain or some kind of primal wounding. And so we look at the other as, how can I get my need met? How can I use you so I can feel better? And, or we're just oblivious to nature and art. We're so absorbed in our own experience and our own wish to feel whole and better. So I think that's some of the underlying reason.
It gets very emotional.
Yeah, we are emotional beings. Absolutely. And when we don't feel safe, we go into fight or flight, as you're suggesting, and can't see the other. We're just thinking about our own survival.
And I think we should think about the state of the culture around us in the USA, where, I mean, we're in a global space right now, but in the USA, there's a real meltdown of the culture wars and the ideologies and alternative facts and who's got the truth, and there is no common ground. That's all a symptom of what's going on here. In the clash of worlds, and people cannot really, pro-choice, pro-life, Big Bang Genesis, on and on, the polarization, the fragmentation with privileging our lens, because we're privileging here and we're using a code that identifies and puts it in boxes. So it's very deep existentially of self and other. And the question of stage one is, oh, wait a minute, I have been objectified. I'm becoming aware now that my lens is being projected on this other, whatever the other is, nature, the world, the work of art, my partner, my child, my parenting, all of that. Can you really meet the other in this sacred open space? How do I get from here to here and open myself up and dilate out of this red zone?
Yeah. Tear the walls down.
Try to, and the whole
those walls feel very protective. You want to tear them. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that idea of alternative facts right there is something that is kind of mind blowing, that we've come to that point of divisiveness, that we have to have alternative, what we call a fact. So,
I see. To prop up that worldview. Okay.
To prop up our worldviews, exactly.
It's very important, Paul, what you're saying, because what fact is, if I'm in a Newton world, I have Newton facts. If in an Einstein world, I have Einstein facts. Ptolemy, or whatever it is, when you change your lens, if a Big Bang Genesis, you're going to have different narratives, different facts. Your fact is a truth. A thought pictures the world. Snow is white if snow is white. These are facts, and the facts are colored by your worlds. Facts here are not the same as facts here. You know, pro-choice, pro-life, different facts. Is abortion murder, or do we have a choice? So this is extremely serious, because our culture, I like to look at the laboratory of American culture right now, for example, but it's across the planet. We are boxed in and we don't know how to connect. We're objectifying each other. We're in a violence because it cuts us off from a deeper unifying force. And that's where we meet in dialogue. That's what we're aiming for. By the time we reach stage 7, we're here. We're moving from here to here. So, Näthan, did you want to join in any?
Yes, Näthan.
Yeah. So I'm an interesting case study myself, having grown up with this guy and double brackets and the philosophy and just absorbing it, but also going through the humbling experience. And I think humbling is a very, very important word here for stage 1 and all the stages, to listen, to truly listen, to put down our interpretive self-privileging our worldview and our standpoint is a very humbling experience. And when you spoke of a kind of phobia of that intimate space, it's not just the intimate space, it's the infinite space. You know, it's Laura Lee, you just mentioned something about those walls make us feel safe in a way. It's like our worldview, the fixedness of what we're used to is a cozy place. And otherness, the otherness of reality, of the other person, of the universe, inherently challenges that, and that's the fight or flight moment. So I've discovered in my own path the humbling experience of really, when I thought I knew what my dad was teaching already. I was like, oh yeah, single brackets, double brackets, yeah, that's my dad's thing, right? Another form of kind of objectifying him. And then once I started to really listen, you know, I'd say as far back as say 15 years ago, I thought I already understood, and then I started to break those walls down. I'm just talking about now my relationship with my father and what he's teaching, and then really going, wow, this is deeper than just another perspective. This is about getting to the underlying code of all perspectives. So to understand it this way really helped me in the computers that we're all looking at right now. we don't see the ones and zeros. We don't see the code. We see what the code projects onto our screen, whatever program. And there's endless games, there's endless programs, there's endless software, there's endless pictures. But what do they all have in common? The ones and zeros.
Yeah.
And so if you think of the single brackets, it doesn't matter which perspective you're coming from or which modality you're in, the wide ranging is all depending on this ground floor code. So if you think of the single brackets, take it off the page and kind of like, it's back here. I can't see my fingers, but it's running all the time. That humbling moment of starting to pull that out in front and get the science, the education to begin to see, oh my goodness, everything I'm doing at lightning speed is chop, 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 chop. All the way. So we don't even realize we're good people, we're loving people, we care, but we might be unwittingly and unknowingly, unconsciously, pre-consciously objectifying the other, which is why it's so essential to get this code education, as my dad calls it.
Well, it's part of the stage, right? It's just part of growing up. When you're an infant, that's all you see. And then you're just on the journey. So.
And that can last your whole life, and it lasts the whole life for many people. The maturation is not a handout or an automatic thing. Yeah.
It takes some effort.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a journey. That's a journey to source, a human journey, the call of Logos. We're Logos kids. But we're cut off from that in a kind of as you said, Laura Lee, it's in the maturation, it's an evolutionary maturation of the species. It's a human journey. All humans need to be in our primary version of ourselves as dialogue sapiens. This is the moral space. I and thou. The moral law is treat the other as yourself. Why? Because you are connected. You're woven in. You can't see it here, but this is where the moral law, of the universe is embodied in the deeper 7 stages. So could we go to stage 2? I think
let's go to stage 2.
Okay.
Näthan, why don't you read stage 2?
I'd be happy to. Crossing over, letting go, and entering the world of the other, self-transformed through empathy. After the initial shock and realization that I now face an alien world, a worldview very different from my own, I feel challenged to inquire, investigate, engage, and enter this new world, to engage in critical thinking. As I open myself to this other, I realize that I need to stand back and distance myself from my former habits and patterns of minding the world. I begin to realize that this other world organizes and processes the world very differently from my way. I realize that I must learn new habits and ways of interpretation to make sense of this different world. I must learn a new language. Indeed, I must translate myself into a different form of life that sees the world differently. This involves a bracketing, a setting aside of my prejudices. I feel a new horizon opening.
Yeah. Thank you. Well read.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, most people never leave stage 1. I think, there's something really precious about stage 2 when you open your eyes and realize there is another world.
First stage of awakening, just that.
Yeah, you're on the journey.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a practicing Christian and you're encountering a Buddhist perspective, Eastern thought, not in your Judeo-Christian tradition, and you realize that Buddha was speaking a totally different language than yours. Yes, Christ, I'm the way, the truth, and life. But Buddha and the Dharma and the Buddha is saying to end the suffering of the human condition, we have to really rehabilitate our minds, right? And you have to say, how do I listen to the Buddha? How do I listen to Krishna, Lord Krishna, coaching Arjuna here to enter the yoga zone, to come in and detach from the codes. He didn't put it that with the red code that was implanted. Usually we say, let go of the object, let go of desire, let go of the ego. But these are all symptoms of the code that's shaping the whole structure of breaking things into pieces and cutting us off this line from the flow of life. So our great coaches, our life coaches, are invoking us to really start that motion, the 7 stages. So stage 2 is vital.
I was talking with your sister, Näthan, and she was telling me how you would all sit around after the dinner table and you would be reading from the great books, right? From the spiritual traditions, and then finding, oh yes, what Buddha said is like what Jesus said, what so-and-so said. So I think, So that's good training early on.
Oh man, yeah.
I guess that's a way to
absolutely.
read the great books is to cross compare them. I also it's interesting that this is not about converting someone to your worldview or them converting you. This is
It's the
about
opposite.
both of you, yourself and other, reaching this state of unity, this logosphere. This is about helping someone engage in this journey together, I'm assuming. Right? We have a
That's right.
responsibility for our own journey, but when we're dialoguing with someone, the goal is to both reach into this higher ground.
This is a very important point, Laura, because really most of the times in everyday life we encounter the other that is not only unwilling to enter into dialogue, but completely cutting it off with a vengeance. And the question lurking in the background that I hope we'll get into our discussion later, how do you then deep dialogue with an other that is pernicious and violently rejecting any attempted dialogue? Talk to the hand. I won't listen to you. Right. And it could be the powers that be. Gandhi speaking to the British Empire and saying, you must leave India. Right. You may get your head bashed in. Or someone in the civil rights movement saying that we are human. You know, we have to be respected in the laws and our freedom as human beings and our dignity. Mm-hmm. And you can get bashed and taken out for that also. So how do you dialogue with
it could be a dangerous road.
Yes, a hostile other, right? But I'll give you one example of a good version of it that I share when we go through these. A senior colleague, a theologian, Ewart Cousins, who was in my institute, he passed away. As a young theology student at Fordham, he went to live with the Lakota natives. Mm-hmm. Oh, and he felt that as a Christian, he would bring the word of Christ to them.
Right.
That was his agenda. But when he went there and was living with them, he began to see day by day, living with them, having meals with them, living in the teepee, and seeing what he said, oh my God, these people see the world much more deeply than I do. Hmm. The buffalo, the mountains, the water, the river, everything is sacred. That's way beyond what I knew. It transformed him. He went with an agenda to transform them, but he got into their world. He experienced it. He learned their language, and he came back. And then you know what he did? The rest of his career, he developed the world spirituality, 26 volumes of the world spirituality, honoring the diverse spiritual traditions. So it's just an example of a real encounter when you move into that world, scary as it is, to let go of your privileging and to dare to walk in the shoes of the other.
So if we can go, my God is not the only God, if we can go from that place, whatever your God is, to let's find what they all have in common. Let's find what the common ground is.
So it's
that
like,
if we can agree to that, yeah.
So it's like taking a hike by yourself and then being joined by other people on the same hike. Different aspects of that hike, they have different views of what they appreciate about that hike, but there's all of a sudden this shared world, the same path, right? Yeah. Ultimately, that's the same path.
Well, I just want one caution, though. We can talk about different worlds and multicultural and all of that here. Right. But what we're talking about is something very deep here. Deep dialogue is stepping back from privileging the code that's fragments and shatters and shreds to meet in the sacred space. And then the unity is supported by diversity. If I'm a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim, and I meet a Hindu or a Buddhist or a scientist as another, I can discover now, wow, there is a common logos between us. It doesn't mean I give up my Christianity. I go to a deeper Christ. I go to a deeper laws of the Torah, of Moses, a deeper Allah, surrender to Allah. So you don't give up your view necessarily, but we'll see in the next 2 or 3 stages, something amazing is going to happen. So let's go to stage 3.
Wait. I want to add something.
I'm sorry, Nedra.
It's okay. I loved your example of the Lakota, and what it brought to mind is on an everyday basis. I was talking to a parent, and the parent said to me, when I had a child, I thought my task was to teach the child and help that child understand the world. And I was going to share so much with that child and help that child make sense of what it means to be a human being. And what I realized, it was just the opposite. I learned so much from that baby. And having that baby come into my life reminded me of joy and wonder and being in the present moment. And so it's like
And that baby did it without words.
Yeah. Baby did it without words. So that's another example of a deep dialogue that we experience every day. And when I coach people to become more dialogical, I think 3 things that have come up in this conversation so far. Number one, it's humbling. Like, like Ashok always says, check your ego at the door. Can I really set my world aside and move into curiosity about the other, openness, and the walls that we put up that we think keep ourselves safe actually do not keep ourselves safe. We are safest when we connect with source, and we connect with that field.
And one another.
And so we really have to define, because we have a need to be safe, we have to redefine how safety happens. So I think all of that is happening in stage 2.
Thank you.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you.
Näthan, did you want to also make a comment before we go to stage 3?
Well, yes, I just really, really briefly, I think that it's helpful to think of, listening in 2 ways. We can listen at somebody, the habit of that, of thinking you already know what the person before they even say it, or thinking about the statement that's coming next. We have all had that experience, having the comeback. I'm thinking of personal relationships especially, and the way we can what we call dialogue oftentimes is nothing more than a dual monologue, taking turns having monologue.
Yes.
But dialogue, double brackets, is that deeper dropping in, and that's the intimacy. It's not just intimacy with the other; it's intimacy with reality in a way.
I agree with that.
And again, there's that humbling moment that puts us on our knees. So, in a good way. So yeah, I feel like that's what's kind of unfolding over the last 2 stages, is that slow, listening like this.
Yeah.
Like that.
And I find that reality is welcoming us when we knock at the door with true humility, curiosity, and an open heart. We're allowed in. We just need to knock at that door, and we are ushered in with the right framework.
And like Näthan says, that body language, you're like, okay, I'm holding on to my view. I'm not going to listen to yours. Exactly.
Double monologue. That was
All right, let's go to
listening, deep listening, really. Listening to the music, listening to the voice of the other, letting her speak in her voice, the very deep art. That's what we're talking about. Stages from going from listening that blocks the other, listening at the listening with and for. So thank you.
All right.
And I just want to add, Nedra, I so appreciate your comment, mother and baby, because my most precious moments with my mother was without words, just being in a state of being and just resting in each other's presence. When you can reach that, that's such a beautiful communion. So
she said she learned a lot from you. So
and by her.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go to stage 3.
Part of what I learned from both Näthan and Ashok was the importance of silence, eye gazing, and breathing.
Yeah.
And so when Paul goes like this, and you encounter somebody like this, I think one of the most important things to do is to help that person breathe and relax, because this kind of posture cuts you off from the source. It cuts you off. You can't really be in source and connected to the field when you're in neuromuscular lock and all that tension in your body. So often the first intervention would be with the body to breathe, relax, open, get curious, and create spaciousness for the other.
And posture reflects that.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. Very cool.
Okay. All right, stage 3, Paul.
No, I was going to say Nedra, but okay.
Nedra.
Yeah, Nedra first.
Stage 3. Inhabiting and experiencing the world of the other, the self transformed into the other. I begin to feel a new and deep empathy for my new habitat. I want to let myself go, free myself to enter, experiment, learn, and grow in this new way of being, to embrace critical thinking. I hold on to my prior views as much as I can, and I'm advancing in a conservative fashion, still, I experience an excitement in discovering and inhabiting a new and different worldview. I have a new profound realization of an other, an alternative reality and form of life. But in the end, I realize this is not my home. But what is my home? I experience a deep shift in my life world. Who am I? What is my true identity? Is this other a part of me? Is my world transforming now?
Thank you. Well read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
Questions
when you-
begin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I think this was such an important question for me. Like, who am I?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, it begins to shake up your whole understanding of who you are as you begin entering this journey and going through the 7 stages.
Which can be
Yeah.
very
Yeah, yeah.
exciting. Yeah.
So there's that
You're on the
turbulence
quest.
of all of a sudden looking for where do I plug into, because all of a sudden my world is collapsing somewhat. That structure that I've held on so tightly all of a sudden is not so real as I thought it was, and that there's this new reality that's blowing the doors off this
And as
previous
the
reality.
blinders start to fall
Yeah,
away
yeah.
from your eyes.
Yeah.
Well said there, Paul. And then when you just use an example of Descartes in his meditations on first philosophy, getting to what is first, he wanted to get to the grammar of logos. And he saw that he could be, when he lived here in everyday culture, he was a gifted creative mathematician, that all of the information here is separated from the viewer and the knower. And if there's a demon of doubt trick you to believe it, then you can't trust anything here. So he said, I'm going to step back from everything, my life, my world, nature, sky, mind, body, everything, and to see if there's anything certain and grounded. And that's when you reach the I am. He said, I am. What I am, I don't know. He stepped back from this. And that's an example of the vulnerability. I don't know who I am, because all the informationized version, the Google version of yourself that we all live by, I am my CV. No, you're deeper than that. Who are you? This is who I am. No. I want you to know behind this CV, who are you?
Yeah.
So the question, that moment, opening up a deeper ID.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's not that I have no ID, but there are 2 ways of having an identification. Here, in the Google space, with informationized version of yourself, and in the meditative space, the yoga space, the Christ space, when Jesus is saying, I am the way, the truth, and life, he's speaking this language, the logos flesh language. Right? And Buddha is speaking this language. Krishna is speaking this language. Moses at the burning bush is bringing through. God is not predicating. God is presenting I am that I am language. Right? So this is extremely, so there's a deeper ID. Can I get to my primary ID? Is a 7th stage journey. Just want to add.
We had a whole radio show based on who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? What's it all about?
Right.
Yeah.
And
So
I
this
love
is a
that
lifelong
term,
quest.
beyond the CV. I mean, that should be a book title, Beyond the CV.
Oh,
Write that
How
down.
our reality has
Yeah.
revealed
My
itself.
journey.
You know, it starts even before the CV. I mean, the
Yeah.
moment you're born, you
Yeah.
are given an identity. You know, you are a girl, you are a boy, you are American, you are this faith. I mean, we are predicated from the day we are born. And there are other cultures.
Label. Yeah.
Think about the cultures. I've read stories about in Africa, when the mother is pregnant, they go out into the forest and they begin to sing a song to the baby. And that baby is identified with the song. And when that child misbehaves after the child is born, and they sing the song to the child at birth, and then if there's some misbehavior, they create the circle for the baby, for the child, and they sing the song again to remind the child who he really is.
Mm.
And so other cultures do it differently than we do. And starting to break with that predication is big, like giving up the identity that you were told that you are and realizing I'm bigger than this identity.
Oh, I was so ready to let go of mine. I felt like such a misfit all my childhood. I was like so ready to break those boundaries and go explore.
Never really bought into it in the first place.
Yeah. Oh my. And I think that's
Exactly.
true for many of us in our generation.
Näthan, we'll get you to join in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say this journey so far, much like the Lakota story, reminds me of some of the iconic movies such as Dances with Wolves, where he goes, in that same journey. And even Avatar recently really struck me. The scene about the middle where he's waking up in the whatever that technology is, and he's going like, what am I doing? He's lost and he's floating. But these movies seem to end in a kind of unilateral shift from one world to another world. Mm-hmm. Rather than, what struck me about this stage more than anything, and I'm reading it for the first time in a little while, is this is not my home either. Mm-hmm. So I left what I thought was my home, but even though I'm daring to go into this person's world to come to that place, but this is not quite it either. It's not to go from one worldview to another, but
find your true home.
What is this that allowed that transition to happen in the first place? And I think that's kind of where I feel the arrow pointing here to that I, thou space. And this is the part of that journey where they're not sure where they're going and they're disoriented, but there's a deeper sense of home that's unfolding here. That's
calling us.
Of safety.
And we're answering that call.
Yeah. Identity, deeper identity. So I'm excited to see 4.
Okay.
Time for 4?
What happens next?
Okay, let's go.
Okay, you read.
Stage 4. Waiting for the screen to adjust for me here. There it goes. Crossing back with expanded vision. Self returns home with new knowledge. I now cross back, return to my own world, bringing back new knowledge of how to think and act, critical thinking, and may even wish to adapt or adopt some form of it for myself. And as a result of this primary encounter with the world of the other, I now realize that there are other ways of understanding reality. I am therefore open to rethinking how I see myself, others, in the world. I encourage myself, I encounter myself and culture anew, with a new open mind. My encounter with radical difference now challenges my former identity, and everything begins to appear in a new light. There now begins a dramatic deepening of my sense of myself, my identity, my ethnicity, my life world, my religion, my culture. There is no return to my former unilateral way of minding.
You've passed the point of no return.
Past the point of no return.
Well read, Paul. Good.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a very big one. So when the person returns back home, whatever your worldview orientation, scientist, believing Muslim, Christian, Jew, Hindu, whatever it is, whether you're coming back, you're going to face some turbulence because now something has happened. You've stepped out of the tribal space, the cultism, the conspiracy, the co-conspiracy of buying into a certain perspective and an identity, and a way of self-making and other processing. Something is happening deeply. And there is as Näthan said, there's a disorientation. That's what Descartes said when he said, I am. He says, I don't know who I am. I'm free falling. I have no settings anymore. I've lost all my predications. All of these building blocks that kept me with a stability, I thought, are all being let go. So there's a disorientation in the crossing. Who am I? So as I say, a Christian returning back to a Christian community, if it happens to be a kind of fundamentalism of Christianity, and you're saying, no, Buddha has some truth being revealed in Buddha, and the yoga has some truth, and Lao Tzu has some truth on it, then that's a very threatening thing to bring back home. So we'll see in the next stage, you're in a danger zone.
Our society runs on this, us all operating on this myth that we're all separate, that all you see is what you get, right? This WYSIWYG world. I mean, our society depends on us all partaking of this.
Yes, but then even more deeply, it's on what narrative, what ideology are you sharing? If you're a scientist and that's the scientific community and you don't want to get religion in there and you're an atheist, well, that's going to block that out in the community of scientists who may share that perspective, or the people who may share a political right-wing ideology, or are you a Republican or a Democrat? What is your ideology? There are going to be deep culture wars in your ideologies because you buy into that. That's truth.
Right.
Truth is meaning and truth. The person whose narrative dominates this space politically, right, wins the day in terms of enforcing their view of reality. So much is at stake in the question of
That's why I think it is such a sacred quest for each of us to figure out our own worldview and follow where we're guided. It's really a sacred quest to do that.
But not an alternative worldview here, but we're going into a deeper form of world encounter. a deeper form of identity.
And if we are truly having a homing pigeon for home, that's where we'll end up.
In home base. Home is home base, right?
Yeah.
You're
And this
heading
is-
home.
Yeah, our GPS deep inside is all set for home.
For the
ultimate
logosphere.
true home.
Thank you there, Laura.
Yes, that is well said. Yes.
It's not here. That's lost. You're fragmented. You're not going to find home here. So
Oh, well, that's the rocky road on the hero journey, isn't it? Navigating that.
The identity crisis is to step back from this and dare courage to go into a deeper understanding of who am I?
Mhm.
I just share a story. For me, anyone who's had an intercultural experience, right, with ethnicity and so on. I was a family from India. I was born in Trinidad. I grew up in Jamaica. I came to New York, right? I seem to have an Indian ethnicity about me, my name is Ashok and so forth. I became a citizen. But people will say, you're Indian, aren't you? I said, no, I'm an American. So no, you're Indian. You're look at you. So I this is not my home. What is America for me is my home. I finally went to India for the first time in 1971 as a visiting professor with my family. And I thought, okay, I'll go to homeland. Maybe I am Indian. Maybe that's my identity. And really was expecting that's where I came from. When I got there, I found I wasn't Indian in that sense. I didn't speak the Hindi. I didn't share the cultural perspective often. I was in love with India, yes. But ultimately, it was not my home. So when I came back to America, I realized, what is my home? I don't feel comfortable in the American ideology culture space here. I went to India and it didn't do it. So who am I? Where is my home? I began to discover I'm a global sapien. I'm a global
sapien. Nicely said.
That was a very important, I'm a global citizen.
I appreciate your play with words.
Yeah.
Global sapien.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Well, ready for the next slide?
Yep.
Hey, Brian Tucker will read the next slide. He's the one who introduced us to Ashok. So let me see if I can get that here.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Stage 5.
It's stage 5. As a result of this new encounter with self, when I cross back from my deep encounter with an other, I begin to experience a profound shift in all aspects of my world, in my inner experience, in my encounter with others, in my relating to the world. I begin to realize that my encounter with the other has shaken the foundation of my former worldview, my former identity. For now that I am mindful of the living reality of other worlds, other perspectives, I can no longer return to my former identity and forget this living presence of the other. Indeed, I now begin to realize that there are many other worlds, other forms of life, other perspectives that surround me. I now open to a plurality of other worlds and perspectives, and this irrevocably changes my sense of self. I feel transformed to a deeper sense of relation and connection with my ecology. I feel more deeply rooted in this experience of connectivity and community. I now see that my true identity is essentially connected with this expansive network of relations with others. I can't say that word. Let's see.
This is the ignition.
This is the ignition of the dialogical critical awakening.
Very good.
Well read. So this is a beginning to really see you're entering the I-thou territory. You're leaving the I-it and that form of life and culture making, self-making, and relations, human relations. Single bracket relations are not double bracket when you're in the zone. Everything is woven together, self and other, right? Self and nature, the ecology, everything. The multiplicity, the pluribus is still unum. You're beginning to get the flavor of being in the zone of the logosphere, in the deep dialogue. And now that the lights of ethics and aesthetics and a new politics, a new way of relating, a new human space is dilating and opening up. You're becoming more humanized as you enter into this space.
Wow.
I think nature just sets it up for this, right? Because when you're in the world, you're hurt, you're wounded, it's desolation, it's cold, it's not always friendly, it's confusing. I mean, it's painful, right? And you go to that space where you are welcome, the sense of the all, I'm interconnected, I've got those spirits put the wind in my sails.
Yeah.
I've got grace, I've found grace. You're set up, we're naturally programmed to seek joy and happiness and comfort, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we are just programmed for this. This is like coming out of the cold. Souls, find your home.
Enjoy
We're just
this.
programmed for this.
Yeah.
Are we not?
Yeah.
Well, we're programmed in the sense we're programmed for this too. We're programmed for the red zone in our cultural habits and addictions.
But I mean, internally, the gifts of our creator, the way that we're designed, our physiology, we're programmed to find God.
The word program, the force, the logosphere is always calling on us at every moment. We're living under the influence. I call it LUI, living under the influence of the call of Sophia. That program has been calling humanity for thousands of years. But we seem to not we hit the wall. And the importance of this moment is to become aware of that wall that's blocking us from really responding to the call of Logos, to become a Logos sapien. So I don't want to call program because
don't like the word programming, but I'm just saying we're designed by our creator. We're designed.
That's well said.
Programming So you have to decide which programming do you want to follow, which operating system do you want? Do you want the one you're born with, or do you want the one that society hands you?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
That is not a light decision to make a decision whether I'm going to leave this and enter into. So am I going to listen to the call of the Logos in all of the forms that it hits me in my life, or am I going to continue to vote immersed within the space that I don't even know that I'm trapped in a matrix that I don't understand? Right. So the question of human choice is to be able to make a choice to leave this and choose this is the ultimate vote. And most people don't get there.
Yeah.
Nedra, what do you think?
Well, as Brian read that, I noticed after he said I'll never forget the living presence of the other. Brian, you chuckled. There was some reaction that you had, and I was curious about that.
Paul, can you put that back up on the screen so I can see that phrase?
Yeah, sure.
I think I was just struck by there's a reverential tone to this, and one can't help but kind of imbue that thou-ness already in this stage. So I guess I was in touch with the emergence of a sense of reverential respect that this stage you're becoming much more aware of and can embody.
Well said. Well said. Exactly.
Beautiful.
That's a double bracket other. That you're beginning to see not a single bracket other that was gaslit by your lens, but the presence of an other that's sacred, whomever, whatever.
Or like Blake said, I can see the world in a blade of grass or a grain of sand.
That's an eternity in that hour. That when a poet has a moment like that, that's right. It's always here around us. We're blocking it. We're blocking it. Sacred space.
Yeah.
Did you want to check in on this?
And if you're truly on the sacred journey, you will find the sacred space.
Yeah. On that note, I think that's another great example. The word sacred, without the code differentiation, what we end up doing is we lean on certain words: nature, sacred, love, spirituality, and these words. We rely on these words in and of themselves to be, the more positive or the more light but every one of them can also be brought down into that single bracket space. So what we end up doing is, unwittingly, that's why it's so important to go on the journey of bringing that code out in front, because if you don't do that, what we end up doing is chasing our tails in so many different modalities. And I've been in Sedona now for 22 years and exposed to just countless forms of spirituality and psychedelic journeys and all kinds of different things. But what I've noticed very, very clearly is what happens is that there's a buzz that we get from this path or that path. Nature's going to do it for me, or ayahuasca is going to do it for me, or this, and we go, and then we hit that ceiling again. Yeah. So we have to drop that thing and find the next shiny object of enlightenment, and so. In order to really, it's easy to sort of get that instant gratification high, if you will, from talking about like dialogue sounds like such a glamorous thing, but to actually go, it's not conversation, it's dropping that code. It's letting go of the power trip, the deep seated power trip of control. And that's why, when we look at, to take it to the global scale, we're really good at pointing at the problems, racism, sexism, they're all symptoms. They're all symptomatic of this deeper form of supremacy, this narrative supremacy, this deep drive to control the word and therefore the world. Because we all grew up in nature, we evolved in nature. Why did we get so bastardized from nature? What happened? Well, could it have something to do with this deep code that then played itself out in this myriad of ways of wars?
And wants to control nature, wants
Yes,
to rest
exactly.
nature in our image.
That's a symptom of the climate disasters that are happening. Our destruction of the environment is another symptom of that power trip, that deep power trip way back here. Because the word is not words, like letters. The word, the infinite word, the source, and the beginning is the word, is life itself. It is the source of nature and life and
Part of this
consciousness.
journey is to surrender.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Brian.
yeah.
Wonderful. Keep
I'm
going on
mindful
here
of-
because we'll be taking comments from
And let's fix to the
audience here.
slides first. You want to go to
Okay.
number 6?
Sure. Yep.
Okay, let's share
I
6.
just want to
Go
say
ahead.
one more thing. That
Sure.
this is why I work with couples and families, because every day we live this. Can I experience the people in my life, the living presence of the other? And so we're faced with this every day.
Beautifully said. Yeah.
Do I really see the other? Do I really sense
Mhm.
the double bracket, what the source in my partner, in my child, in my pet? I mean, can I really live this day in and day out? It's a huge challenge, but transformative to do so.
Yeah.
Thank you. I hope we're realizing how immediate this is. We want to get pragmatic and practical. This is the most practical thing facing us now, medically, in surviving as a culture, as a people, as a human. It's a human journey. We have to do this.
As a planet.
This is a deep crisis we're in. It's a medical crisis. We've got to enter the humanized space to be able to live in the logos and reach our calling.
Yeah.
I hope you see that. How do you raise a child if you're raising a child in an objectified way rather than a sacred child? That's a violent act to just uncritically buy into that objectification.
Yeah.
Stage 6.
All right.
Now this we broke up into 3 parts because there's a lot
Okay.
of text. So the global awakening, the paradigm shift matures. Self, related to self, others, the world. In my transformed dialogical critical awakening, I discover a deeper common ground between the multiple worlds and perspectives that surround me. I have a new sense that self and others are inseparably bound together in a boundless interrelational web. I realize that multiplicity and diversity enriches myself and my world. I now see that all worlds are situated in a common ground of reality, and that radical differences are nevertheless situated in a field of unity. I experience 3 related dimensions of global dialogical critical awakening, and they are, next slide, A. Do you want to read A?
No, keep going.
An ever-deepening discovery of self. I become aware of a deep inner dialogue within myself. I discover a rich multiplicity and diversity of perspectives within my own inner world. In this inner dialogue, I feel increasingly more deeply rooted and grounded in my world. My identity is enriched with multiplicity, and I experience a more potent sense of my uniqueness as I, where did it go?
Was that a change slides? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. There you go. As I celebrate.
As I celebrate my expanded world of shared relation with others and with the ecology.
And this is the final stage. Go ahead. Final step of 6.
A dynamic dialogue opens with others in my community. As my new inner dialogue and critical thinking evolves, I find myself in a new and transformed relation with others who share my world, my tradition, my religion, my culture. This new phase of relations with my peers can be disorienting and disconcerting, for as I now dramatically grow in my identity, I find myself in an estranged distance from many of my peers, even as I discover a deeper affinity and embrace my community, my polis. I face a new turbulence, miscommunication, and misunderstanding with my colleagues, and a challenging and dramatic dialogue unfolds. Am I pulling? I think there's C as well.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, there's C.
Okay.
A global awakening emerges in all aspects of my life as this inner and outer dialogue, critical thinking matures. I realize that my understanding of my world enters a new, quote, global light. I realize I'm surrounded with many worldviews. I enter a global horizon and a global consciousness in which interreligious, intercultural, interideological, interdisciplinary, interpersonal dialogues abound in all directions. I now have a new globalized sense of reality, a dialogical domain in which multiple alternative worlds are situated in dynamic and ever deepening relations. With this understanding comes a new attitude to life and to ethics. All right.
Well,
That's
read.
a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot.
There you go.
So it's like the head of the seed popping up, right? And seeing the new horizon and a new sun.
That's right. Now you're entering the deep dialogue, sacred space of you're experiencing pragmatically the double bracket relationality, which is held together in the field of being. It's reality itself is woven. And even though we're here and we're chopping it, we're cutting off, we're using the pieces, we're in a Lego life, Lego pieces, not Logos flow, right? Still, we're doing that, but it's always flowing. Nature is always. Our connection with each other and with ecology is always presiding. Logos, the logosphere is always there. That's being, that's reality. And our version and downloads of it here, we create the fragmentation, the ideology wars, the battles, the violence, the ethnic wars, Holocaust, genocide, suicide, nihilism. All of these worldviews are suffering from not having the tapping the light of reason, the global light. It's a global light because all worlds are coming out of that.
Well, you could say all roads lead to Logos eventually. We might have a lot of detours and road blockades, but I would assume that all roads would eventually lead to the primordial sense of being. Tony has a question.
Oh yeah, Tony, go ahead and join us. There you are.
Well, thank you. This is quite fascinating, and I'm really enjoying every bit of this, and I'm learning things. One question I have is that of manifestation rather than actively pursuing. And if I could mention an example, as an undergraduate, I went to work at a job at a brand new radio telescope, the most powerful in the world, and it had a problem. It didn't work right. And this had the faculty of Harvard and the faculty of MIT working on it for over a year. After being there for 2.5 months, I woke up one morning and I knew what the answer was. And I went and I told them. And this was because I accidentally took a class as a freshman that only graduate students were supposed to take on 19th century astronomy, and it related to that. So anyway, as somebody in engineering and now in astrophysics, it was remarkable to me that this just came to me in a dream, and I tracked back to things that happened that made this possible. And you know, sometimes it was fumbling, sometimes it was seemingly going in the wrong direction, but this knowledge came forth and solved the problem and is still being used worldwide.
Wow. And just a mere accident.
It just came from, yeah. And if I could share one other one, which is
one at a time. Yeah. See, I don't think it was an accident. I think this is our connection to the field, and the field has infinite intelligence. And you had an opening for whatever reason, your openness, your curiosity, you were able to somehow download that. And I don't know, Ashok, if you want to comment on that. I think that's really
Well, to build on what you just said, Nedra, that whatever is going on in our agendas, in our being cut off from deeper, with this boundary cutting us off from flow, our form of synthetic unity that we create by our wills here, right? And when we get an insight, no one can be without being. Once we got this formula, this axiom about deep science, source science, being holds all beings. And whatever story we've got going or complex stories, we couldn't be for a moment without being. And so this force is always operating. So when we take credit for, oh, the lights went on, I created electricity, or I created the internet, or MRIs, or I got this discovery, or E equals mc squared, or all of these things, or Newton's laws, it's always tapping into and downloading because it's always operating on us. The infinite force, it's not just gravity, it's levity, the source of logos. The infinite force is not negligible. It's always operating on us. So when athletes go into the zone, or a performer just enters that moment when she is the music, or she is the singing, right? Or I am the dance. That happens because this cannot overrule this. The source field is always there, and we can spontaneously access it. So I think you say it's not accidental, Nedra, you're right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, something you should know about Tony is that he keeps a list of seeming coincidences in his life, right? You do that, Tony. You pay attention to those seeming coincidences.
Well, that's uncanny. I could probably talk for a long time on that, but I won't. But I thought you mentioned one other thing. As a graduate student in Philadelphia, I'm walking westward on Chestnut Street. I encounter a friend of mine who's walking with another woman, and she was very unhappy. She had just lost her glasses in the Annenberg Center. And she said she and her friend had been looking for them for an hour. To my surprise, a voice came out of my mouth saying, "Come with me, I know where they are." And it was like I was up above looking down, like, what's happening?
Oh, you're witnessing that. Yeah.
And we walked to the Annenberg Center. I walked over into the Ivy, bent over, picked them up, and handed her glasses.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And so anyway, these little things, I don't know. I think they're evidences.
I love it when
but evidence of the things you're talking about, of different ways of things manifesting. And yes, I was doing things in my life. I was meditating and things like that, but I was not particularly quite on the path that you're talking about. Yet things were coming forth,
Right.
and do come forth.
That's right.
Yeah.
I love it when these two worlds collide, that of being a scientist and now something
we're building bridges.
unexplained, building bridges with the unexplained and having it come together. And
well, let's not forget Newton was out to look at God's handiwork in a spiritual way.
Right.
The cutting edge of science is trying to find what is that connective tissue of all reality. So they're still on the quest, just two different approaches. Yeah.
I like when you think about coincidences and incidences. Having a Sedona moment, for example, it's funny. What we say here is a coincidence. What may be, this may appear chaotic, chaos to this form of single bracket reason. But when you enter into this place, the fractal nature of the flow of reality is so profound that this lens can't handle it. And that's when you see that everything is coincidental. It's not coincidental, accidental, but all incidences are coincidences. Buddha got that formula. Everything co-arises. That's the butterfly effect.
So you're saying that in chaos theory, even though we don't see the connections, if you pull back far enough and look at the grand scheme of thing, we see that they're patterns we don't necessarily recognize.
Chaotic.
Close, but there's some rhythm and rhyme and purpose to everything.
It's chaotic. It's a deeper form of
one more.
That's
Go
right.
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. March 15th, 1977, I went to a concert at the University of Pennsylvania Museum, and I liked it. It was called Songs from the Hill, and I liked it enough that I bought a record. I took down the poster. I kept my ticket, and I kept the description. A couple of years ago, I was talking to a friend, taking out the record, and he started reading, and it said, "Songs from the Hill was composed the prior 2 summers in Placitas, New Mexico." Well, guess what?
That's where you ended up.
You're in Placitas, New Mexico.
That's where I live, and my house is on the hill she was looking at.
Yeah.
and I had never been west then. I'd never ever dreamed I'd end up in New Mexico. I was a northeastern boy.
It's really kind of like we shove the walls out, right?
Yeah.
We still feel contained. We still feel we're in a safe container of the cosmos, of creation of the universe. We've just pushed the walls out to include everything else. So you talked about a sense of safety, Nedra. When we find that there's somebody at home overwatching, when there's a grand scheme, where there's an intelligence, when we're in the flow of that, that feels very secure and safe, does it not? It feels like there's
trust the flow.
It's making sense in just a grander scheme. And that allows us, I think, to surrender to that, to grace. It allows us. We want to feel at home. We feel like the universe is our backyard, right? We're home.
That's what Carl Jung believed, that these coincidences are indicative of being in the flow.
Yeah.
And so Tony, it's wonderful to hear these stories.
Yeah, he's
talking about your education in Philadelphia, which is near Haverford, not at Haverford, but same locale.
The three of us have lived in Philadelphia, Ashok, Näthan, and myself. So we know exactly where you're talking about.
Yes, and I've been on Haverford campus many times.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tony. Tony always has great things to share. Thanks, Tony.
I appreciate Tony being a scientist and a mystic combined.
Well,
right?
Don't tell NASA. Yeah.
I'm sure. He's so brilliant. They can't deny his work. Yeah.
And Näthan, did you have more to share?
He worked on the James Webb Space Telescope most recently.
He designed the mirrors.
Polished the mirrors. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, there we go.
Näthan?
What's next?
I think we should
comments. Raise your hand.
We should probably get to 7, but I will say that another one of the perspectives that helped me understand the depth of this journey is the metaphor of the model of the cosmos that we were working with when Ptolemy was mapping the movement of the stars and the heavenly bodies. It was based on the orientation that the Earth was the center, right?
Yeah.
And as he got deeper and deeper into trying to map these movements, they became more and more complicated, and he had to create epicycles and all kinds of different. It became chaotic, and it didn't make sense. And then Copernicus comes along and reorients the center of the solar system to the sun, and then amazingly, everything that was complicated fell into a beautiful, simplified. Grace. So I think that point that came up about the flow is chaotic and nonsensical and coincidental to the single bracket from the single bracket perspective, which is, the Earth is the center, I'm the center kind of analogy there. But then when we get the proper center, the source is the center, unum is the center, the infinite is the center of all operations, all thought processes, everything that was chaotic and chopped up suddenly comes into that beautiful simplified flow. As complex as the universe is, I guess we're not grinding against it, when we're still in the single bracket space, we're almost grinding against nature. And so it's all this friction, but then when we get into the zone, into the flow, we're part of that beautiful dance, just like all the cosmos, all the planets, all of nature. And when we can
enter that between state where the center is everywhere experientially and the boundaries are nowhere. That is a mystical state because it's like the rule set operates differently. You're in a different zone of space and time that you experience directly. Right?
So when you call it mystical, though, it's mystical perhaps from this perspective.
It shouldn't be other. The mystic shouldn't be other. I think the mystic is the home to all of us. We all have access. But go ahead.
Scientific, the source science, the great teachers of first philosophy, source science. When you get the code, the DNA for logos, then you see you're in the source of science is here. So it may appear mystical to this limited perspective because this is beyond words. You open up a deeper access to the word power. And this is deep science. This is scientific. So it's not mystical. Mystical becomes
I know you don't like that word.
It becomes demystified. In the source science.
Mystical becomes demystified.
That's great. I like that quote.
And we can go home.
Now, I'm writing down quotes as we go along. Shiny object of enlightenment, Sedona moment. I'm just all these great little quotes. So fantastic.
We should go to slide 7.
Okay, number 7.
There's something really important in this stage for me, which is the deep dialogue with the other becomes an inner dialogue. And that's such an important shift because the I-thou relationship with the other, we begin to have an I-thou relationship with ourselves.
Good.
Oh, well
Because
said.
not only do we objectify others, we objectify ourselves, and we allow objectification to happen. So this is that shift from in the space between to the space also within, the dialogue becoming deeper is such an important shift.
And this is important, Nedra, very much, because it's a normal state to have multiple worldviews. I could be raised in a Judeo-Christian religious perspective, but I'm also a practicing theoretical scientist. I'm a citizen in an ecumenical space of democracy where I keep my religion out of my politics. I'm practicing yoga. I'm seeing my psychotherapist, who happens to be Jungian, and showing me that I've got an anima and an animus within me, and that's driving me crazy. So I'm practicing feng shui and moving the furniture. How do I integrate my worlds? Inner dialogue is to become a whole integral new person. That's the integral science.
And we must build the bridges within ourselves.
That's the first
Exactly,
thing.
Laura. Exactly.
Yeah, that's it.
Connect it all up.
All right. Fabulous. And Näthan, Tony's already requested that you become a guest at some point down the road.
Oh, thanks. I would love to.
We can arrange that.
Yeah. He's in Sedona, so we can find him.
good, yeah.
You have to do it just by psychically or whatever.
He should
Here we go.
perform some music for you.
He's an incredible
very
musician.
good.
That's right.
All right.
Exactly.
Okay, let's go to number 7. Share screen, and we'll go. I guess, Näthan, you want to read? Here we go.
I'd be happy to. Okay. Stage 7, personal and global transforming of life and behavior. Self lives and acts in a new global dialogical consciousness. As this paradigm shift in my life matures, I realize that there is a deep change in all aspects of my life, a new moral consciousness and a new practice. As my new dialogical critical consciousness becomes a habit of life, I find that my behavior and my disposition to self and other has blossomed. I feel a new sense of community with myself, with others, and with the ecology. I realize that the deepest care for myself essentially involves my care for others and for the environment. I have a deeper sense of belonging to my world, to my community, and with this, a boundless sense of responsibility in all of my conduct. I now realize that I am transformed in the deepest habits of mind and behavior. I find a deeper sense of self-realization and fulfillment and meaning in my life and my relations with others and the world around me.
Thank you. Well read.
You know, it sounds like from stage 6, where you're describing really a dark night of the soul, and you find that your communications or you're at odds with the old worldview around you as this new world emerges. This is really about coming through it and finding the gift. The gift is, now I've found my footing. Now I've found home. I've entered into the gift. And then the next step is bring that back to your community, right? When you are full up of this gift, the next stage of the hero's journey is you run home and you bring that out to your community, which I suppose is what your whole work is about, Ashok. About you bringing
that is all of the great spiritual traditions have that turn. And Buddha, for example, you can't be a Buddha on the mountain, because the Buddha realizes that we're all interconnected. So the suffering of everyday people is your suffering. When you understand the Dharma, when you understand the Dharma of Logos, of interconnectivity, then you are interconnected with everyday people and their suffering. And so the calling is for you to roll up your sleeves and do the medicine and bring the medicine to the people to end the suffering.
Well, and also you're so full, you're so infused with this that you're just spilling out. You just have no choice but to be a conduit.
I'm glad you said that, Lily. I was going to speak to that very point because it could seem almost like, and a lot of the students go through this in Dad's courses, and I've gone through this, where you think, well, how can this really actually happen? Is this a utopian idea? Can love really prevail on planet Earth? But that point you just made is, and what strikes me about this whole journey now, recapturing it, it speaks to the personal responsibility. You can't do this on anybody else. Right. It's up to each individual to take this journey, but the reverse infectiousness of that, if it's like the single brackets is like a pandemic and it's contagious, this is way more contagious, like contagious laughter or
Yeah.
contagious joy. When you're zoning and you're in that deep dialogue with reality, you are emanating that vibration, that love, and you don't have to strong arm anyone into it or try to
It's like a tuning
convince them.
fork. You're vibing there, and
Yeah.
this vibing, it
Yeah.
picks up. It is contagious. It goes
Yeah.
viral. Yeah.
This is a big secret about how does someone who's gotten this grace and gift move in the world where people are fragmented. There is culture war. How do you move, say, in the American political situation, that polis thing? How do you move in your family, which is deeply divided and fragmented, or in your workplace and so forth? How do you do that without getting trapped? How do you become a therapist, a healer, without taking this home with you? Right? That's a question. How can you be a bodhisattva in the Buddhist tradition, a teacher who's been seeing this, who's called to help on this suffering, because it's your suffering too, but you don't suffer it. You walk in joy in the midst of it. That's a trick, because you don't you don't revert. To be a true healer, you can't revert back into the symptom and the cause of the disorder. You've got to help take the people out of it and become aware of this. And that calls for code education. To me, the most important thing I see for 2,500 years of wisdom on this planet is we have not yet had sufficient code education to help people. This is deep reason. This is a human. This is rational being. When Socrates says, know thyself, this self, the rational, the one in the logos, the Christ self, the Quaker self, the Mosaic self, the Muslim self, like Rumi, the Muslim mystic.
Can we also bring in the whole ecosphere? You talked about ecology, but we're harming all of the ecosphere.
Absolutely.
We're harming all of the species.
That's right.
Chewing up the earth. When are we going to realize that maybe we can step in and say all of creation is sacred, all of the web of life is sacred, all of our planet is sacred? And how can we, maybe we've had to grow this technology in order to do some good with it finally.
That's well said.
Because radically transformed our
Well, we can have activism here.
Yeah.
There's a hunger problem, there's a nuclear problem, right? There's a gun problem. They're on and on, right? There's ecology, there's a climate control, but there's a deeper climate, the climate of consciousness that is generating these meltdowns.
Beautiful.
And until we see this medically and go into activism here, what's the ultimate journey of activism? Is from single bracket activism to activision.
Yeah.
And that takes code education. If we don't face this is clear. If we don't face the code issues blocking us from coming into our true human form of compassion and love and flourishing with the ecology in sacred space.
So it's about that transition through these steps of personal growth, understanding, expansion, knowledge, that we can make that shift. It has to happen on the level of consciousness. It's not about protesting. The protesting is fine, but beyond that, to really have change happening on the level of the individual, the level of individual consciousness and individuals. We just had this conversation on Friday with our advanced community. We hosted a roundtable discussion about the difference or the connecting points between transcendence and transformation, because transcendence by itself allows for us to deep individually and have this flavor of that unlimited being of knowledge or whatever crossing over. But how do we draw that back into the world that we live in, and how do we transform ourselves, and therefore be able to participate in our community, in our world? All of that kind of ties back together. That we this idea that I love the idea of this climate of consciousness is where
where this real storm is brewing.
Where the real storm is brewing.
Yeah.
Well,
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in my passion of all my 55 years of teaching these young, brilliant people, it's to help them get aware of this code that's shaping our cultural lives and many worldviews and our academic work. And they begin to see we're in Google space of information. We're great information. We got into Haverford College because we were great on taking tests and getting my CV and my qualifications and my predications. And I got in, great. And then you get more, you learn the history, you learn the science, you learn the economics, you learn the arts, you're an athlete, you all here. But when the students see this, is OMG, I want to live here. Can we live here? And I can see the meltdown of our culture around us. The democracy is failing. It's not working. The culture wars, the alternative facts. There's no foundation. There's no common ground. What do we do? Say, Professor Gangadeen, how do we get the culture as a whole to be educated in this code that's having these symptomatic meltdowns so that we can enter into the promised land?
Right.
The USA is here or USA is here.
Mm-hmm.
All humans. And if we can get to the problem, when Martin Luther King said, I've been to the mountaintop, I've seen the other side. I may not get there with you. Where's there? The promised land. It's not geography. It's a land of consciousness and awakened being a human. It's a space of dialogue, the culture of deep dialogue.
Well said.
This is urgent. This is urgent.
Yeah.
We must have code education.
Brian, you're saying something very profound in the chat room. Do you want to just share?
Oh, this is such a delight to hear you all today, Ashok and Näthan and Nedra. I'm really struck by, especially with Tony, and you're referencing the James Webb Telescope, because in this period of time, that's been one of the most hopeful signs of humanity, that we've been able to have that telescope broadcasting and beaming back some of the earliest data about the universe. But I'm wondering, Ashok, like, your aspiration for science must be quite profound. I'd love to hear you speak where you would love to see science lead us next. One thing particularly that has come from this James Webb is this understanding that we're living in a time developmental universe, that there are, like, in every moment, the universe is in a cosmogenesis, that it's rebirthing and dying off at the same moment. What do you see as being kind of the next frontier? I know consciousness must play into it, but where would you see science turning its lens of inquiry next, so we could, kind of come to that next stage?
That's a great question. And I'd like to comment on that, because science too has to face the code issue. Because we're naturally going to be seeing nature and the phenomena and trying to make sense and get a theoretical explanation of why those events, whether it's astrophysics or when we do our mathematics, whatever it is, we do economics, there's egonomics or logonomics. What is wealth? Really, every field, there's politics and there's politics, there's democracy and democracy. So science now, for example, is still laboring under the restrictions of this version of rationality. And we experiment and we get the evidence and we make a decision and we affirm it or deny it. We're doing our science here. But what would science be like here? And it's no longer a split between spirituality and science, because you're doing deep science when you get into the source. What is it like here? It's non-local. Astrophysics is beginning to get it. That the vast differences in the universe is connected in somehow. The butterfly effect, the movement of the wings, causation here is the causal nexus. Buddha got this. And so to get to the unified field, the grand unified field, you can't find it here, because this is the disunifying matrix. To get to the unified field is a logosphere. And what's that like? Well, I wrote a paper on Einstein for the centennial celebration of Einstein's birth. And I went to Hofstra University, and after 2 years of looking, what is the metaphysics, the ontology of Einstein's physics, E equals mc squared? What's missing in that formula? Great breakthrough, which you tapped from here, right? It's where is consciousness? How do we get consciousness into that E equals mc squared? Mm-hmm. What is the velocity of consciousness? So I asked that question at the conference with all these scientists. How do we get consciousness into the formula? Because the mind of Einstein, and Heisenberg got it, the presence of the observer affects the observed, the subject and the object. So here, how do you get consciousness into that? So what is the velocity of consciousness, I asked, and that blew the meeting open. People didn't know how to answer it. And really, what is the velocity of consciousness? How do you go from single bracket time to double bracket time? This is important. You have to break the time barrier and the single bracket space to go into the double bracket space.
Experientially enter that.
Space and time are bound together. They arise, a space-time continuum. Einstein began to get that. Let's go, Albert, let's all go, as scientists, let's go into the unified field, the butterfly effect, and learn now with the higher calculus to encounter the sacredness of nature, right? And get the formulas here, get deep mathematics. The foundation of mathematics is here. That's just a hint of what I would say is the journey of science. Right. To upgrade science. Science is great, but it can be greater than it is now, because it's bound by a mental code of rationality that's blocking us from a deeper access to the phenomena. This phenomena, this is noumena. And it was said by Kant, we can't know noumena, the thing itself. But all the great wisdom is saying, yes, you can. You can't get it with this code. But when you start to zone it and enter into it, and you get into the deeper logos code, now you can tap noumena, phenomena.
Aren't we part of this equation, though? Because you put a double bracket around a word, and it's just symbols on a page. But what you're denoting is, if I'm to say, I'm going to go sit under the tree, if you double bracket the tree, that tree might be the tree of life, or from the seed to the flowering tree, or it might be the whole 14.8 billion years of evolution that came together to allow a tree to be grown on a thin biosphere of a single planet. How did life begin? That would be part of that question. So, I mean, we're the containers of this. Mm-hmm. It's our consciousness that is containing the full measure of a double bracketed tree, or whatever you want to put between your brackets. It's a roadmap, but it's not the holistic understanding. It's not us mirroring back to creation what that tree is. Yeah. We're part of this equation. We're little containers of this.
Well, when you mirrors back to creation. That metaphor can be backfire a bit. A container contains. This is a container. It's a Lego place. But when you discontain and uncontain and open up, there's a cheating way to be finite here, which is very safe. I'm finite. But to be a finite being here, to be finite is to interface with the infinite. This is scary. And that's where, like Blake, the poet, there's infinity in a grain of sand. Every moment, every sip of water, every drop of water is sacred. Every breath is sacred. That's what we're talking about. We experience the other this way. We experience nature this way. But can you experience this way? We use language here, single bracket language, but can you get double bracket language? So if Jesus, for example, is the logos in the flesh, the word made flesh, he's experience. The Christ experience is, I am the way, the truth, and the life. That's a symbol. So there's symbols here and symbols here. Yeah. And these symbols are objectified Lego pieces, but the symbolic power of this, when you say, and Descartes said, I am, he was amming. This double bracket symbols are experiential. That's the point. It's not that, it's still a mark on a paper, but now you got experiences. It's still theory. You got to practice it. No, that's the ultimate practice. When you dilate the mind and enter the space and go from phenomena to noumena to flow, that's the ultimate double bracket experience. So what's blocking us from all humans celebrating the joy and bliss of life, of well-being? It's well-being we're talking about, health. Ill-being, if you're cut off from being, you're going to have ill-being. And if you tap being, then you're going to have well-being, which is happiness. So if that's the call, say 1776, life, liberty, well-being. This is freedom here. This is bondage.
I guess what's blocking us, there's a big curriculum here that we're assigned. We've got a big curriculum, how to navigate the world in this reality, how to navigate that reality. It takes many lifetimes to cover it all.
Sometimes we overcomplicate things we don't need to complicate, but yeah.
I think we're socialized into the code, the monologue code, because if you look at a little baby, that baby is born so open and it's a sensing, feeling being. And as that child adapts to the world, sensing and feeling, even as thinking and acting come online, but sensing and feeling begin to shut down. And Kelly said something in the chat about feeling. We live in a culture that numbs itself, and part of this will have to be feeling. And when you talked about the tree, how many of us really appreciate that when we breathe, we give off carbon dioxide and we breathe in the oxygen, and that's only possible because of the tree. Like if we just realized that truth, I think we would see the tree in a more double bracket way than just saying there's a tree. We are in mutual reciprocity with the tree. And, so it's so, it's so fundamental. It would shift everything, as the 7 stages are suggesting, if we could begin
and were there cultures that raised the members of its society to appreciate that?
I think
probably there were early on, maybe not perfect, but they certainly had some inroads into this.
Yeah.
So what did we leave
Well,
behind in our hurtling towards yeah.
Well,
So-
if we go back to the infant, the language of the infant is very musical. And I think that just gets us back to Näthan and musicality and the importance of hearing the music of the universe and hearing the wind and hearing the birds and really there's a whole different way to raise us in this culture.
Right. Brian, you wanted to comment?
I was glad to hear you clarify that, Nedra, with the comment about feeling. So it gets me wondering about feeling our way into the logosphere and what practices you, Nedra, Näthan, Ashok talk about that bring us, because I'm experiencing the Kuya-Mange practice as being one of those embodied forms of spirituality. What other forms, what are the ways we begin to feel our way into
pathways?
Yeah.
And I know other people have questions, so I'll just listen.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian.
I'll just comment on that point. I mean, the wisdom coaching of our great wisdom teachers, and wisdom is not here. Knowledge is here, but knowledge becomes wisdom when we break the barrier of the code that restricts and constricts rationality in the light of reason, and to enter into. I'm talking about the light of reason here. When the lights go on, enlightenment, right, is a pathway in the destiny of humans to be logos sapiens. And so when we're teaching the students, well, what is Buddha saying about that in life coaching? That when you see that this is a source of suffering, you become aware of that. The third noble truth, we have a choice. We can stay here or we can rehabilitate our mind. So the fourth noble truth is practice rehabilitation 24/7. Be mindful. Mind your minding. Don't get pulled in. But mind your mind, be critically aware of your minding, because you're making your life and your suffering with your own minding malpractice. So by minding your mind habitually, that's the point. So how do you become a Quaker, a Christ sapien, a Christian? You have to mind Christ, mind God, put God first. To become a Jew is to love God, Yahweh, with all your mind, body, soul, 24/7. What does that mean? You can't put your derivative code first. You've got to put the God code first, the source code first. How do you do that practice? So the 7 stages have to be embodied in the curriculum of being a human. We must raise our children with a sensitivity to the code and learn how to be bilingual and bicultural, from culture here to
multilingual.
Yes, exactly. Practice, mindfulness is the prescription of our great teachers.
Kelly, you might want to turn on your mic. You're putting a lot of interesting comments in the chat room.
Yeah, we'll raise your hand if you'd like to share. Yeah. And
yes, what is the cure? Indeed. Yeah.
I didn't ask what the cure was. Tony asked me what the cure was for the blind spot.
Okay.
And I just said I think we all have a blind spot. I don't know everyone's names yet, but Jan invited me here about the rocks, and I've been pretty much watching all of your videos since then. And like, coincidences are funny because I feel like Jan Van Ness knew that I needed this, and that I was going through awakenings and things, and I needed, a place to feel better, and for people to talk to people that understand what I'm like feeling. And I feel like I'm losing my blind spot. Like I'm starting to see everything, and sometimes it's just too much. I love it that I'm waking up, but it's getting also very harder because I see everything, and it gives me some anxiety.
Bit of a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
There's a breakdown.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out how to handle all that, and just being here and this energy, like from everyone here, it just makes me feel so much better, and I feel like I'm not alone. So thank you.
Beautifully said. And Nedra, you'd probably be the perfect person to respond to that.
Yeah, well, I think anxiety results when we do feel alone and we feel disconnected from source. So we have to open our eyes, see it, feel it, and connect, and stay connected to one another.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I
think Kelly was answering her own question. That's
And that's the joy of sharing our journeys with one another as well.
Yeah.
I just want to comment and build on that a little bit, that all the great teachers knew that you don't just blithely go out from this safety zone and this container into the light of logos.
Right.
You've got to be prepared. You have to get up the infrastructure of the brain, of the mind, of the body. You have to be prepared habitually to acclimate to the new climate and the new habitat. So you're right, Kelly. It is scary and it's disorienting and it's upsetting, and it creates a different kind of anxiety to be opened up to this light, the doors of perception, the portal to presence. What is it like to be present and living in presence? That's
our sea legs. Yeah.
It takes great courage. It takes great courage.
Very alone, and
I'd
I
like to,
freak out in nature, and I just need to be alone a lot now because I'm experiencing so many things, and I don't feel like anyone around me is quite on that same level of consciousness. You know, like that we were just talking about consciousness. I just don't feel like I have anyone around that is on that same level that we can go below the surface.
That's right. And
we're also listening to your own inner voice as well.
Well said. Two ways of being alone. Go ahead now. Go ahead.
If I may, because I sympathize with you, Kelly, so much. I've gone through so many of those moments of I guess you could call it overwhelm, and I, you know, luckily it coincided with COVID largely when I you know, the world pulled away all over the place, but I was going there anyway, just out of sheer overstimulation from the dilation process, and that's a real thing. And many times in my life, you know, my earlier incarnation, let's call it, of my spiritual path, there's a mentality out there of kind of like trying to hack the zone. We're all trying to find life hacks, right? So, but if you think about that word hacking, like hacking into the zone, like hacking into sacred space, it's not good.
Aggressive.
Disrespectful. We can try to take psychedelics, or we can. I went through breath workshops and breathe, hyperventilating to get to the zone, and you know, all these things we're trying to do to get to the zone.
I don't need much. I'm already there.
You know, I understand. Well, it's ever deepening. It's ever deepening. But if you think of this technology as a kind of, when you said you have to get the infrastructure, because otherwise we get Kundalini shock from opening up too quick, too fast. We get that force shock, and that creates all kinds of anxiety and discomfort. And I help my clients with this very, very point. The very few who are ready to really make that crossing and take the red pill, so to speak, because it's a very daring thing to do, but you can do it safely. The technology is like a life raft, if you will, to make it across that ocean.
There are lots of life rafts in life.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly, and good luck on your journey.
All of us can relate.
Thank you for joining our community here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really, really think a lot of you, and you two together, you just have so much light. I emailed you and kind of told you how much it all meant to me to be here for the last few Sundays. So I just thank you.
Oh,
thank
beautiful.
you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Nedra, what are your thoughts, Nedra?
Yeah, as we wind it up.
I was thinking about that video you and I made about the caterpillar to the Buddha fly, and you know, the caterpillar feeling so alone, and so the perspective being so narrow on the ground, and what it is to be the butterfly, to have a bigger perspective, and that transformation that happens in the chrysalis. It's not an easy process. It's dark, it's chaotic. But as the new butterfly cells start emerging in the chrysalis, the digestive system of the caterpillar actually begins to gobble up the new butterfly cells. And it's not until the butterfly cells join together, they find other butterfly cells of similar frequency, that they can overcome the caterpillar's digestive system.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah, so there's something about meetings like this and communities and being in connection so that we can overcome the caterpillar digestive system and become the Buddha fly, the butterfly. So that's what
I think it's so beautifully programmed, this hero's journey that we're on, because it's really that sense of discomfort and feeling alone that propels us to move forward and follow that North Star, that inner voice, that elixir, right? We're just, our GPS switches on, and we may have a lot of detours, and the road is going to grow rocky at times, but and know that that's okay.
Right.
But just
And that
keep
power
going.
of community, you know, many years ago, when I first visited like a place like Mesa Verde or Chaco Canyon, and you see how community worked in these traditional cultures in the past, where the plaza, where everybody came together, they didn't have these individual boxes where they all were separated from one another. They had a place to sleep, and then they came out, and the children and the families, and everybody worked together. And there's a disadvantage to the technology of the Western world, where we've separated ourselves, and now those of us that are becoming more and more aware of seeing the need to get back into community.
Yeah.
And of course, it's not possible for all of us to be in the same place at the same time nowadays, but
we're connecting.
If we can flip the other side of what happened during COVID, and that is the reason why all of us came together using technology. At least we said, well, at least we'll have this. And now we have found it to be a gift to be able to have international conferences and conversations and have family and create tribe. We have tribal experiences with people.
In a good way, Ashok.
Yeah, 14 or 15 different countries at a time having an experience together. And so that I think is a new power, a new realization coming back to that need.
Architecture as well, like our architecture separates us.
Yeah.
But I want to just share a really quick story with you, Kelly, about my journey coming in from the cold. And it wasn't until we were talking with a gentleman on the something about dreams, right? Whatever his book is on dreams. And he wanted somebody to share a dream that was recurring. And so I started to I go, like, nobody's talking. So I'm like, my training filled dead air. Oh yeah, I've got a dream. I got a recurring dream. And I started to tell him a little bit about our pet wolf Malamute dog and a dream. He's passed away, that I'm looking for him. And suddenly there he is coming in from out of the cold. And he's a little bit dusty, a little bit raggedy and very tired, but he's coming because I called to him, wanting to see him. And he's coming in out of the cold. And he goes, stop. You're the one coming in out of the cold, he said. What is it about you that you're coming in out of the cold? And I really took me aback, and I had to stop and think. I go, my whole life, I felt so out of place and so alone and so misunderstood. And I've come in out of the cold. I found community. I found my purpose. I found my mate. I found home. You know,
that must be why I'm so drawn
coming in
to
out
you.
of the cold. And so I think that is such a journey for all of us.
Right.
You could describe that.
I just want to mention that was Frederick Coolidge.
Thank you.
Yeah, professor in
Well,
college.
I'm going to turn my mic off. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Who there was one other.
Oh, Denise has her hand up. Denise, yes, please share.
Hello, Denise.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me and allowing me to be with you today. I was thinking, I picked up on, Nedra, your word that you used earlier, and in terms of receptivity. You used the word receptivity. And and as people were talking, that word just kept just coming back. And I was thinking about the ability, the Celtic wheel has this time in the year where we're receptive, where we're in that dark space. And then there's the summertime where we're active. And this ability to be in this mode of not only passivity, but activity. Now, culturally, we've been in this very patriarchic, active mode from a cultural, and I think what we're doing right now is we're in the process of bringing the mother back into the consciousness, the psyche.
Yeah.
But it's not just a time of a year. It's a couple of times a day. It's within the hour. It's knowing that this energy of logos, this understanding of being a logos sapient, knowing that I'm in the process of being receptive And I bring with me this next time around all the knowledge that I had prior to, on the first ring of the circle. And the circle just gets bigger and bigger, and we start catching not only our own energy, but the energies of others, so that this spiral gets bigger and bigger and stronger. And it's not such an effort when we're in that space. When we're in that space. Just a comment. Thank you.
Beautifully said. No, that's a wonderful
that.
way of seeing the whole process. And
that air I'm breathing, that molecule was in the tree not too long ago.
But also that wheel of life, that wheel of,
with matter, with energy.
I know we're running out of time, but
it's time to wrap it up.
And it is time to wrap it up. But final comments.
Thank you so much.
around the.
We'll start with you, Näthan, and we'll go to Nedra and then Ashok and have the final word here.
Thank you, Denise.
First of all, I can't believe 2 hours flew by like that. So this has been a lot of fun, and really enjoy deep dialoguing with everyone here, and hearing everyone's perspectives and being able to share my experience. And I really feel that we are the imaginal cells beginning to join and create the network. So I feel honored to be a part of the community. So thank you to you guys and everyone who's listening.
Thank you. And per Tony's request, you'll have to join us on a Sunday of your own.
I would love that.
Yeah.
And thanks.
And Nedra is on May 7th. She will return and talk to us about the science of love, the biochemistry of love, practical skill sets, the sending, receiving within intimacy. Yeah, we're going to talk. You mentor love, so we want to hear about that, Nedra, on May 7th. Appreciate that. And your participation today. A lot of brilliant points you all made. So we learned a lot.
It's been wonderful to be here, and I haven't seen Näthan in a few years. It's great to see you.
Yeah.
And I just want to add one final comment about receptivity. The brain, when Ashok says minding your mind, the brain is either in a reactive mode or a receptive mode. It's really only got those two modes. And so when we mind our minds, we are moving into a more receptive mode. And that's an important shift.
Beautiful.
So,
thank you all. It's been a pleasure being with you all, Lauralee and Paul. Thank you for holding this space for dialogue and for the deep dialogue. Beautifully read and presented the 7 stages. Thank you everyone who listened and participated. And hopefully we are going to be able to cultivate systemically a rise to a culture of deep dialogue. Thank you for
beautiful understanding and giving description to that process that we have a feel for, but not having the language to put it into perspective like you've done. So a wonderful presentation, and all 3 of you being able to join us today.
It was nice to put it into action. It was nice to dissect it and really understand it, and really not just theorize it, but put it into action.
This is recorded. This will be presented, available as a recording. So please share it with others, and because this is a really powerful, necessary conversation that we need to really push forward with.
This is part of the great healing, isn't it, for our world? The skill sets that we need to all move forward and to really set up the next generation with a planet that they can inhabit.
Exactly.
So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Blessings, good health to everyone.